Hi everyone, my name is Mikey Mhenna. I'm the Executive Director of afikra. Today's conversation features our special guest, Kristyan. I'm honored to introduce our special guest, Kristyan Sarkis, who is a type designer and a lettering artist born in Beirut and based in Amsterdam currently. He holds a master's in type and media from the Royal Academy of Art at The Hague. He's co-founded TPTQ Arabic, a type foundry specialized in high-quality Arabic fonts, Arab type design, and has won many, many awards from all over the world. He's taught all over the world, is a prolific teacher, I would say, and very well known in his field. Kristyan, thank you so much for joining. This is really an honor.
Thank you, Mikey, for having me, and thank you to afikra for having me here. It's really a pleasure to talk to. Well, I mean, as you told me in the beginning that the audience is not necessarily type designers or people in the field, and I usually talk to such people. So it's a privilege to talk to a more general audience.
Perfect. That's what we have for you. If we are anything, we are general. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Growing up where you grew up, which I think you grew up in Beirut mostly, at what point did you think, you know what, I want to start designing fonts?
Yeah, at no point while growing up, to be honest. Even when I was in the university doing my design studies, Arabic was something that we all were kind of scared of. At the time, also, you have to remember that there wasn't a lot of Arabic typefaces that we used to identify with, basically. And even our design curriculums are very much Western design curriculum, so it's not well embedded, I would say, in the studies. Until I met one teacher, who's Yara Khouri, who's now my very good friend, who taught actually a course, and we had a project that was a type design project. And because of her, I remember all my classmates and I really fell in love with the Arabic script. But it was a very rudimentary kind of basic kind of project. It was until later when I actually went to work with Yara in Muhtaraf. After graduation, I immediately went to work with her. And yeah, it was there. It was one afternoon. I really had basically nothing to do, and she was like, "Hey, we have this type design project. Do you wanna try your hand at it?" I'm like, "But I really don't know much about it." She was like, "Let's try." And I tried, and like really fell in love with it on that afternoon. And I remember her saying also that afternoon, "Hey, you have a knack for this thing." So I'm like, "Okay, let's see." And I ended up working on the whole project, actually, by myself first, and then with the help of Greta Khouri, who was my colleague at the time, and with Yara. So yeah, that's how it started. And after that, it was really like I had one mission, which was to save enough money to be able to travel and do my master's and just study type design.
So what does it mean to have a knack for type design? And let me ask that question a little more precisely. Why are there some designers who like the Arabic script, but would hate being type designers?
Well, type design as a discipline is quite slow. It's a very slow discipline. It's quite humbling as well, because I keep saying this. Your main job is to design something that people should not see. It should not stand out in people's eyes. They should just read it. They should read the content without the letters just stopping their eyes, basically. And the discipline itself is quite nerdy. It's quite geeky, basically. So not a lot of people have the patience to do that. But the Arabic script, I mean, wherever you are in the world, you can appreciate the beauty of the Arabic script. It's a very, very rich and diverse script that was developed, especially the calligraphy side of it, was developed for longer than 1,000 years. So, and all over the world. So you can imagine how much wealth we have in terms of script heritage. So yeah.
So I pulled a slide from one of your lectures. And by the way, if you're really interested in Kristyan's work, there's a few really good lectures on YouTube that I highly recommend of him talking about his work. And I pulled this image from one of your slides. And I thought it was a really useful demonstration of some of almost the fundamental variables that can help understand different Arabic scripts. Can you walk me through this image that I'm looking at, and what are these these six categories?
So this was my first official type design project. It was in my master's program in type and media. I wanted to work on the Diwani style, or something based or inspired by the Diwani style, because I thought this was a highly unexplored style, basically. And I wanted to try to see what we can come out with in terms of type. And I went to Lebanon to study with calligrapher Ali Asri. My aim was not to study how to write. I didn't want to become a calligrapher. And I just wanted to learn how the script is composed, basically. What are the mechanics of the script and all the characteristics that would help me develop these letters into actually a typeface eventually. So that's what happened. I studied with Ali Asi, who was very generous with his knowledge to basically, tell me all the characteristics of the Diwani style. And let me just tell you one thing. When I talk about characteristics, at the time I wasn't aware really of what are the characteristics of a certain calligraphic style. I just wanted to learn everything, every practical information that I could learn about the style, and just to be able to use it later on. So for example, if you look at the angle, is really the angle of the pen, how you place your pen on the paper to create a certain stroke. And this angle of the pen is a really major characteristic in Arabic or in any other script. It's a major characteristic of any script, because it gives you the contrast, it gives you the thicks and thins of the letter, which really gives the texture for the whole system. Then there's like the rotation is in this specific style. There's a lot of rotation, meaning that the pen is rotated or lifted up and used only in from the tip. So there's these kind of concrete knowledge that you can extract from the script to later on use, because when you do type, just let me make this clear. Type comes from writing. So whatever we're doing is always inspired from writing. You can go as far as you want from writing, but it still the root is always writing. So understanding how the pen creates shapes on the paper is really crucial to develop later on, or to mimic later on this concept of contrast, basically. So another thing is the rhombic dot construction, which is just the proportions of the letters. That's really measured. This is how we measure the letters in Arabic, with these dots, basically. So how many letters does the alif grow high? How many dots in width for other letters, and so on. Even the height of the letters, how high does it go over the baseline? That's also counted with the dots. So this kind of information.
And this framework can be applied to understand any specific Arabic typeface, right? Like these six categories is basically the way you sort of...
Not specifically those things. This is again, it was my intuition telling me to just extract all this information. But later on, I got to understand really what I'm doing, and with the help of the program in Type and Media, because so in Type and Media, there's this thing called Type Cooker, which is basically, again, about dissecting the script, mostly the Latin script, but it could also apply to a lot of other scripts, into specific characteristics. Those characteristics are proportions, weight, contrast. So basically, all kinds of, characteristics. There's no other way.
Yeah, that's the right word,
And then turning those characteristics into parameters, into scales that you can play on. So this idea of type cooker gives you recipes. That's why it's called type cooker. It gives you different recipes of proportions and contrast and weight and construction and so on. And then you draw a certain lettering or typeface based on that. So this idea stuck with me a lot. And for the next few years after graduating, I started first intuitively using it in my work. And then I met other people like Lara Kaptan, who's a dear friend now, also Khajak Apelian, and other people who are now Arabic type designers. We use this method very much in Arabic as well. So we started putting our efforts together to create basically a type cooker for Arabic, to basically extract all the characteristics that we could from the Arabic script, so we can develop a method of drawing much more diverse Arabic type and lettering.
So this is maybe a stupid question, but
Go ahead.
do you think you're a better typographer now than you were 10 years ago?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So in what ways were you bad, relatively?
Well,
like what muscles are the weakest when you
I
start
definitely
working?
have much more knowledge into the script now, knowledge that I didn't have at the time. I didn't have, I didn't know, for example, exactly how does the pen function. I didn't know exactly why the proportions of a certain script or certain style were made like this. I didn't know the effect of these proportions on legibility or readability. There's a lot of, it's mostly about knowledge. Of course, drawing skills as well. I mean, it's like any sport. The more you practice, the better you get at it. But I would say the more important part is the knowledge that I have now is much bigger than the knowledge I had 10 years ago.
When you think back to some of the earlier work that you did, like it's funny because like as we've had a few people who work in this sort of like typography space on the conversation series, for me it seems like it's like engineering, you know. It's I feel like sometimes artists are like drawing pictures of bridges, and you guys are building bridges. And it's like really focused on like how can the weight of the cars not collapse the bridge.
I mean, type design is very, very much an applied art. It's very much, we are creating softwares at the end of the day. I'm not creating an art piece when I create a typeface. I'm creating a software that is supposed to handle all kinds of text. Of course, there are typefaces designed for specific settings, like some are specifically designed for text, some are specifically designed for display purposes, for newspapers, for magazines. But in general, a typeface should be able to carry all kinds of text. And that's why it's not, it's not a specific, that's why I always make a clear distinction between what lettering is and what type design is. Though both deal with letters, they are very, very different disciplines. Lettering is a lot freer. It's more, you're creating a final product. But when you create a typeface, you're creating more of a tool that will be used by designers actually to carry a certain content. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes sense. Over the course of your career, are there trends in this space where all of a sudden there is sort of something that's in fashion, where all the sort of different type foundries are all trying to respond to something commercial in the market, and everybody's trying to create, you know, a different attempt at solving a problem that everyone's working on, and then 10 years later everybody starts solving a different problem? Have you noticed those types of trends?
Absolutely, there are trends. I mean, I don't necessarily follow trends, but I, like everyone, I react to things around me. And when I came onto the scene, there was a very popular trend of those oversimplified, very reductionist, very simple Arabic typefaces that, to me, did not give justice to the wealth of the Arabic
Like
script.
every museum in the Arab world's typeface.
Like almost, I mean, they're quite popular, especially in the Gulf region, and it's not just museums; it's really all over the place. So especially in the commercial world, so those and the corporate world as well. And I understand there was not enough technical know-how at the time. There was not enough, not enough interest, I guess, in designing this kind of stuff. Also, there was the question of designing stuff that looked as much as possible like Latin typefaces, because they were supposed to work with Latin typefaces. So this was a major trend. It's still until now. It's not like it died at some point. It's still very much alive until now. But I would like to think that my work, is a reaction to this trend. I try, like I consciously work against this trend actually. So to explore very different expressions of the Arabic script, because it's a shame to reduce all this heritage that we have to just one specific voice.
So do you, as you're developing a new font, is there Is there stress testing? Like, how do you test for readability? How do you test for, um, like if you're building a tool, like you would road test it. How do you make sure that it doesn't only work, programmatically and the software actually performs? Okay, the software performs, but it has to be used. How do you know that the users are actually
Well,
responding well to it?
there are obviously a lot of different phases of testing that we have to go through.
Okay.
Testing, for example, first all the letters are working properly in all kinds of languages. Then we have to test the spacing, that all the spacing is working. Then we have to test all the mark positioning, meaning all the vocalization marks, if they are placed correctly. So there's a lot of putting the typeface in different, all kinds of different texts, different languages.
Yeah.
And like really as much text as possible to see as much as many options as possible. But there's also like asking around. You have to trust your eye first. That's
Yeah.
one very important thing. That's not always easy to do also, because eventually you're relying on yourself, and this is something that is going to be used and read by a lot of other people. I always like to test my typefaces actually on my parents. I like to ask them to read stuff without wearing their glasses. They are in their 60s. They obviously need their glasses, and I ask them to read them without glasses. And if they read them very smoothly, it's something already, to be honest. And of course, I'm there's a group around me of talented designers as well. We are good friends, so we share our opinions with each other. We give each other feedback. So it's a bit of all of this.
I was hoping it wasn't just your parents, because then if it's just your parents, yeah, Habibi, it's beautiful. I love it.
No. Not at all. It's not. No, I have actually very critical parents. That's also where I get it from. I'm a very critical person.
Okay,
So,
good.
but yeah, it's not about the beauty. I'm not asking them about the beauty of the work. I'm always asking them, can you read this? And I ask them to read it out loud for me, so that there's no chances of them, making it up or lying. Yeah.
Well, because for me, I find that to be an interesting challenge in terms of, like how legible it is, and like how quickly people read. Because, I mean, calligraphy is sort of like obstructs understanding almost, but text should be communicating messages as easily as possible.
Not always. Some calligraphic styles are meant to be super easily read. Of course, you have to take into consideration the context of time. Now we don't study anymore a typical calligraphic style at school, for example, so we can read it very easily. But back in its time, the Ruk'a, for example, style was created to be read and written very quickly and very easily. Whereas other styles, like the Thuluth style, that is made to be a monumental, ornamented style, that is the compositions are a lot more complex to decipher and to read. So it's not necessarily that the calligraphy is difficult to read, and we have to make it simpler with type. It's not always the case. But yeah, I mean, nowadays, of course, text has a different shape. The readers have a different knowledge. They have different upbringing, a different education, basically. So yeah. But of course, a big part of type design is about abstracting those calligraphic forms into simpler forms.
So I want to talk a little bit about the sort of role that you've taken on as an educator. And this, when I first became familiar with your work was seeing these posters around Beirut and understanding that there was somebody who was running these workshops. And so from how did this workshop series become conceived? What is the point of it? Why do you even care? Why are you trying to educate people in this field?
So this started years ago, and it started very impulsively, with no plan to make it as a series of workshops. It was during Beirut Design Week, I think, the first time it happened. And there was, I have my close friends, Khajak Apelian and Lara Bala, had this design studio called Majoun. and we decided to host a workshop basically about lettering together. And that's how the first episode came about. We already had some knowledge about, how to dissect the Arabic script into concrete knowledge that we can deliver to participants, and then make them work on very different expressions of specific words that explore a specific theme. So that's why every episode has a different theme. So it started again very impulsively, and we got a really good reaction, so we decided to do it again. And then at some point, Wael Morcos, our good friend as well, joined us, and then since then it's been me, Khajak, and Wael handling the series. So it's very similar to how we work. It's again about dissecting the script into concrete knowledge that we can, or the characteristics of the script into concrete knowledge, into parametric scales that we can later use to build new letters on top. And it grew because we kept getting invited to different places. And so every time one of us or two of us get invited, we make sure to, like we always do, our lettering workshops through Arabic Lettering Workshop. And yeah, the series has now, I think, 15 different episodes in different parts of the world, and we plan to keep going for sure.
So, I was, right before we started the call, I was telling you that I had this Airbnb guest staying with me who was taking this workshop at AUB.
Mm-hmm.
And to my surprise, he was a typographer, and he worked for a type foundry, and mostly all the fonts that he'd worked on were Latin, were Latin script. And I was asking, why do you care about Arabic script? And he said, it helps inform my work, and understand some of the technical challenges that my colleagues who are developing Arabic scripts helps inform our work. And so I'm curious, what other scripts have you studied, and are most of the people who do this workshop people who are working on sort of Thai and Japanese and Latin and
Well, first let me make a distinction. The workshop that you're talking about in the AB is a different one than this one.
Oh, okay, great. So keep on going.
Yeah, this one is called Arabic Lettering Workshop, and it's a lettering workshop. The other one is called Arabic Type Design Beirut, which is a more of a program actually for type design. That one is a program that I co-founded with Lara Kaptan, my dear friend and type designer as well. And so it's a program that is hosted by AAB. That one, we did 3 versions of it so far, and we also plan to keep going once COVID is over. So there are 2 different things. One is for lettering, one is for type design. In terms of how, the first time we did the type design program, we had, I think, 22 students from literally all over the world. Actually, Mike, who's here with us, was also with us in the program. Mike is Canadian, for example. There were people from Spain, from Singapore, from Malaysia, all over the Arab world, a lot of different nationalities. And well, there's 2 parts as to why a non-Arab or non-native person of the Arabic script would be interested in this. First, it's a personal interest. A lot of type designers, when they study, they are interested in multiple scripts. Also, the design programs like the one in Reading in the UK and Type and Media here already infuse different scripts other than Latin, like Cyrillic, Greek. In Reading as well, they have Indic scripts, the Devanagari, and so on. And so I'm also teaching in Type and Media Arabic. So there's already this interest in exploring different scripts. That's because the discipline of type design is quite similar when it applies to all kinds of different scripts. It's just about the knowledge differs, the characteristics of the scripts differ, but the discipline of type design is similar. And someone who's really interested, that's why I keep saying that I'm always encouraging people, whether they are natives of the script or not, if they want to make Arabic typefaces, please go for it. Just make sure that you have enough knowledge to do it. But it's never how to say a negative point that they don't speak or the language or read the script. They will develop a certain affinity with the script with time and with research. So that's why it could be interesting for them. So um, looking at a different script and how it functions can inform or can give them new ideas for how they handle also the Latin script, but also can give them new skills and new knowledge to design Arabic typefaces. There's a lot of currently non-natives of the Arabic script that are designing really beautiful Arabic typefaces. So, yeah.
So interesting. Okay, there's a ton of questions in the chat, so I feel the need to jump into it. But I'm curious. I've come across these designs that you've done as well that feature typography.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious if this feels like a different part of your brain is doing this work.
So again, a small correction distinction. So let's call these lettering.
Okay, yeah, I love it when people correct me because.
Well, you told me to think of you as an 18-year-old who doesn't know much about this, so that's what I'm doing. Let's call these lettering. Typography is more about the use of type in books and magazines and newspapers.
And what is the word font? While we're correcting me.
Sorry.
What does the word font mean?
Font is the actual file.
Font is the file itself.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm so happy you're doing it.
Yeah, this is what we use it now for. It's true, but your question is very valid. It's true. It's a different part of my brain that works when I work on these things, especially because, again, here, for example, if I'm looking at the piece on the left, I'm only concerned with these 4 words. I'm not thinking of how these characteristics that I chose to apply here apply to other letters. So I don't care about how it works in, I don't know, letter wow, for example, which is not here. I care only about those. And here it's really about composing. It's about composition. And for example, in this specific case, it was very important for me to realize that all 4 words start with a similar letter. Actually, it's the same letter in 3 cases, and one is the same letter with like so ha ha jim ha. But so this was very important to compose the lettering piece around that, and also to notice that 2 of the words end similarly from the other side. So that's how the whole composition was built around this. But when I'm drawing a lettering in general, I keep saying this, that my lettering work is a reaction to something. So I'm always trying to express a certain feeling with it. Type is less about feeling and more about exploring different kind of concepts. It's not the same kind of stories that I tell with lettering and with type. I would easily say that my lettering work is much more emotional than type design. But of course, there's quite some emotion in the letters I draw in type as well. It's just much more subtle and much more embedded, like really deep down, not as obvious and apparent as in lettering.
Yeah, this is art that is design.
You can think of it like this. Yeah, you can think of it like this.
Okay, let's switch to the Q&A, and then we're going to open up to everybody on the right, on the chat. Okay, so the first question is, what are you reading or watching right now?
Watching nothing, actually, for some reason, although I'm always watching something. I'm reading now a book called The Power of Habit. And I wanted, basically it came out of wanting to live a healthier life, quit smoking and stuff like that. So I see it on it. So it's quite a nice book, I have to say. I'm really enjoying it. It explains how the habit loop works and how you can manipulate it and so on. Nice.
I hope you finish it. People who start books called The Power of Habit who don't actually finish them always worry me.
I'm literally midway now, and I want to finish it on purpose just to finish it. Otherwise, I have to say the first part was much more interesting for me than it is now, but I'm going to finish it just for the exercise of it, basically.
Yeah. Okay, great. Who would you love to shadow for a day, past or present?
Yeah, I thought about this, actually. I don't know about shadowing, but I guess if I have to say something, I would say one of those three. It's either my partner Peter Bilak or my mentor and my partner in TPTQ Arabic, who's really the most efficient and the most organized person I know. I would love to see how he goes about his day and yeah, does his things. Yeah, I'm also really how to say smitten by the work of Wes Anderson and Björk, so I would love to follow
Oh yeah, those are good choices.
and see what how they build their art.
Fantastic. All right, next one. What do people most misunderstand about your work?
That I'm a calligrapher. Everyone assumes that if you're a type designer and you work with letters, that you are a calligrapher. And sometimes I have to say yes, because not everyone is able to understand what type design is. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm not a calligrapher, just to be clear.
To reaffirm.
My calligraphy is not that good.
Okay, whose work do you admire or are inspired by? Not necessarily in your field, but
honestly, the honest answer is it's my friends who inspire me the most, and my friends are either type designers like Khajak Apelian, and Marcos Blara Kaptan, Yara Khouri, those people around me, or other disciplines like Hanan Kai, who's an illustrator and a brilliant one.
Who's on the call today?
Is she?
Yeah.
She said she's going to join. I'm not sure she's joining.
Yeah, she's on.
So it's people like them. I'm lucky to have them as friends also, and I'm always inspired by their work.
Fantastic. And as a shout out, Wael's talk is already on our website, and Pascal Zoghbi and Khashag is going to be on in January. Okay, let's open it up to the chat. The first question comes from Naila. Naila, do you want to ask your question?
So I have tons of questions for you, but Mike is limiting us to one per person.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you, so once you know the parameters of a script, do you often find yourself breaking the rules?
Absolutely. I want to know the parameters so I can break them. I don't want to know the parameters so I can get stuck in the past. So I want to know them well so I can manipulate them really to my own liking, basically.
So, over the past 10 years, Arabic typeface design has come such a long way in terms of the quality and the variety. So do you see in today's scene, what are the further things, what are other things we can work on or develop in the Arabic type design world?
Well, I mean, yes, of course, it has come a long way since 10 years, but we are still sort of at the beginning. There's still a lot to do. We are very much in the birth or rebirth, like a renaissance, basically. So now we have a lot more tools. We have a lot more softwares that are adapted to the Arabic script that give us a lot more options. And there's so much that we can still do. There's a lot of unexplored territories still. So yeah, there's a lot. We are still very much at the beginning.
Thanks, Naila. Noha?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation and sharing all your experiences.
You're very welcome.
I would like to ask about how you match a Latin script with an Arabic script, especially when you were telling us about how you're inspired by the Diwani and the tradition of that. So when you choose a Latin script, do you choose something similar or something more simple, and what are the reasons?
Okay, so what I have done in my own career so far is I have many times designed an Arabic typeface as a counterpart for a Latin typeface. So the Latin typeface existed first. And what I keep telling about this is that my intention is never to match anything visually. My intention is to tell a story that is similar to the Latin story, but also very much owned by the Arabic typeface by itself. And of course, there are some considerations to take, like the color. What we call the color is the general appearance of a certain text. It has a certain color, certain grayness, certain blackness. So this is important. The contrast, how thick and thin it goes, that needs to be, they need to be complementary, the Arabic and Latin. But other than that, I'm not ever dictating the Arabic based on the Latin, like taking pieces from here and applying them there, or something. It's always about understanding the Latin typeface really well, dissecting it really well, understanding what it tries to do in its own world, and trying to create a similar story for the Arabic.
Is that the same when you
Great.
have an Arabic text and then you want to write something with Latin inside the Arabic text? Is that also how you would deal with that?
Well, you're confusing a bit the question, but I mean, this is the job of a typesetter or a designer. I'm more a type designer. So when I use typefaces is very different than when I design typefaces. When you use typefaces, you can always choose the pairing based on whatever your design concept is. They don't always need to match perfectly, or they don't always need to give the same, to have the same voice or to have the same character. So I'm always a fan of mixing different voices for the Arabic and for the Latin to give them different identities, basically. So this is a question of using the typefaces, not making them.
Okay, thank you
Great.
so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Naha. Nihal, you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. How much work really goes into harmonizing different typefaces for example, different devices or softwares?
What do you mean?
As in, like, so if you've designed a typeface, how much effort would you have to put in to make sure that it goes the same? For example, if it's being used on a Mac or it's being used on a Windows or on a Linux.
Well, what I work with the OpenType standards, which are technically supposed to work equally well on all softwares. Not all softwares, support OpenType features as equally as the others, but I don't put a specific effort into making my font work on Microsoft Word, for example. I work with the OpenType standards, and whatever application supports those, the font will work perfectly fine.
Thank you.
Unless it's a specific client who needs the typeface to work on a specific application, then we look into how the application itself is built, and then really it's more the work of a font engineer. It's not necessarily my work.
Can I actually ask questions about this? OpenType standards, I have two questions. When were OpenType standards developed, and when were Arabic scripts added to those standards?
I honestly don't know. I don't know when OpenType standards were developed. We have to look it up.
Yeah. Okay. This is super interesting.
Yeah.
Note to 18-year-old self.
Yes.
Okay. Mahmoud is up next.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for your experience with us. So my question is, you talked a lot about like the importance of calligraphy for type designers, but like, if you're starting a completely new typeface, like you want to create a new typeface, where do you look for inspiration other than calligraphy? Is there like anything else that can inspire a type designer other than calligraphy and script?
So just again, a small distinction. When I talk about the relationship of type to writing, I'm not necessarily talking about calligraphy. Writing is a bigger umbrella than calligraphy. I'm talking about the actual script in all of its forms, because all the knowledge that we want or that we need is embedded there. So whether it's in a calligraphic form or in a more informal writing or in architecture or in pottery or all forms of the script basically that have existed. In terms of inspiration doesn't always necessarily come from that. For me, the knowledge comes from there. Inspiration can come from really anything. It can come from a certain need of a typeface, like, okay, I want to design a typeface. For example, like when I had an interest to design Thuraya, a typeface that goes in a slanted mode, it types and it goes down. I wanted to explore this specific feature. I was really intrigued by this one feature. It could come from it could really come from anything, the inspiration to design a typeface. It could come from wanting to explore something, a new concept that has not been explored in the history of the Arabic letters, for example. So it could come from, if we are saying that I'm designing a typeface that is specifically for newspapers, then it could come from the use of the typeface in newspapers. Yeah, but really inspiration can come from like any other thing in any other discipline. I think you can get inspired by anything, by a walk you have, by an idea you have, by meeting people. Yeah.
Okay, just one tiny more question. Can you tell me how you say type designer in Arabic? Because this is has been like an issue recently. So I want to know
type design is normally تصميم الخط الطباعي.
Okay.
So this is what I know, but I'm not the best at this, I have to say. But I do think that type design is تصميم الخط الطباعي.
All right, thank you.
You're very welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hello.
So I'm a young graphic designer. I'm graduating this year, and I study in the UK. So I've kind of been learning this whole Arabic thing by myself. But I know from certain books like by Scriptual. I interviewed Wael Marcos a few weeks ago. I know there's problems with the history of graphic design, of knowing kind of where our history came from. So my question is, when you were starting, did you find it hard to find resources? Do you struggle with basically, just finding resources, finding
Absolutely.
history of it?
Absolutely. When I was starting, it was very difficult to find resources. There were only a handful of books that you could rely on, especially for Arabic type design. There was none at the time for Arabic type design. There was a book by Huda Abifaz called Arabic Typography, which was like a comprehensive book about a bit about the calligraphic scripts, a bit about type design. But up until this point, actually, there is no specific specialized book about type design for Arabic. It's not like now the situation is much better. It's not much better. I do think that there have been a lot of efforts in the last few years to add to the library of Arabic design. Most recently, the book of Bahia and Haytham, which is about the history of Arabic graphic design, which is a book everyone has been waiting for ages. And I think I really want to thank them from my heart for doing this effort, because it's something we really majorly need in the Arab world, to basically give the students, people like you, basically to the chance to know the history of our region, not just the Western history of design. But in terms of type design, it's really, I relied mostly on books about the script, about calligraphy, about, again, like all kinds of traditional arts that are related to writing. So yeah, and then from there I drew my own inspiration, basically, because there are no books about type design.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Great. So I have two questions, and I think if there's any other in the chat, they'll pop up. So I have two questions. Most of the type designers I know or I'm aware of are from the Levant, and that's because I've spent most of my time in the Levant. I'm curious what other sort of who in this space is doing work that's really admirable or interesting across the region, that maybe people on the call or I should be aware of? And is there sort of geographic reference points or their exposure sort of leading to different types of outputs? That's the first question. The second question is there like a holy grail that everyone is sort of, everyone in this space is like, oh, yeah, we could pull this off, but for X, Y reason, maybe it's a technological reason, or maybe it's a consumer reason, a commercial reason, we haven't been able to achieve it. Is there like a holy grail that everyone is sort of working towards? So like for a long time, maybe it's like, maybe there's this goes back to this idea of the trends, right? Everyone right now is trying, for a while, was trying to sort of bring this to the most simplistic form. So is there a sort of a holy grail in terms of where it swings the other way, and we want to have something that's like very ornate and ornamental and feels very traditional, but also very modern? And
I mean, some people are I'll start with the second question.
Sure.
Some people are quite interested in trying to bring into type as many mechanics as there are in the script, which are quite complex. And that is really more of a technological feat than it is a design thing. But it's both. But also it requires a lot of technology basically. But that's not specifically my own interest, for example, in designing type. I can see that now a lot more people are educated in type design, and a lot of them are from the Arab world. And just there's a lot of interest in exploring their own identity through the letter forms. So this is what I think now the field is going towards, which I think is really great, because we need our own voices. Type is a voice. So we need our own voices to express our own identities, things that resemble us more than things that have been imposed on us, let's say, either by the West or by post-colonial thinking. So it's good to start coming up with our own, with our own identity. That's one. The first question was, again, can you remind me?
Around geographic diversity, are there other type designers
for
throughout the region?
some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, also the people I know, a lot of the people I know in terms of type designers, type design are Lebanese as well. But there are everywhere. There are people doing amazing work in Egypt, in the Northwest Africa. There are, it's just that for some reason, they're not as present on the international scene, let's say. But there are, for sure.
When you look at their work, does it feel, can you taste it? Can you say, oh, this person's from Egypt? Is there any reason that would be the case, the way you might in a musician or in a visual artist say, oh, their perspective and their experience is informing their work?
Sometimes when the context is quite far from each other, let's say, for example, between the Arab world and the Iranian design scene, you could tell the difference. I could tell the difference very quickly. But sometimes within the Arab world, it's not very obvious, the differences. You could tell, I think, if it's from West Africa or the Middle East, that could have a different flair. But there isn't yet enough work so we can make an analysis like this and really understand or see the differences and pinpoint all the differences, you know? Yeah.
Okay, one final question before we log off. You know, you alluded to this idea that this is the Renaissance, and there's a Renaissance going on, and there's this momentum building in this space. In 20 years, what do you hope to be working on? What are the problems you hope to be solving? Do you know, like Renaissances kind of end, right? It turns into something else. What hope to achieve in this Renaissance, and what are the new problems that you hope to be unlocking?
That's a very difficult question. I don't know if I've ever thought that much ahead, like what I would want to be doing in 20 years. Well, I hope that I would still be designing type, to start with that. You never know what happens. But to be honest, I feel like I have a lot to explore. A lot of different characteristics are still completely unexplored. A lot of virgin territories in the Arabic type design field. So I hope that I continue to explore new ideas. I don't want to get stuck in the same formula and just repeat myself. I mean, obviously, when you design a lot of typefaces, there will be some ideas that you explore more than once. But I hope to always widen the experiments, to try to always work on new features, new characteristics of the script that haven't been dealt with until this point. And there's a lot.
What is one example of a virgin territory?
Well, again, for example, let's say now we're talking about variable fonts, and how does that affect Arabic? Variable fonts is, I don't know if I can explain it very quickly, but it's sorry.
Yes, you can.
It's basically what we call live interpolation that happens if you design something that is super light, something that is super dark. Usually there used to be specific weights that are set in between. Now variable font is a whole design space where you can move around, basically in between the space, and you can stop wherever you want as the user of the type, not just as the designer of the type. So there are a lot of, for example, how would that apply if we talk about the med in Arabic? You know, in Arabic, all the connections between the letters can be extended. So can you extend, how much can we extend them? Can we really work on something that extends, to have different levels of extensions and so on? When I designed the typeface for the Louvre Abu Dhabi, for example, a few years ago, I did try to explore this idea of extensions. And this came out of a specific need because the Arabic was always looking smaller than the French or the English. So we added these extensions of the letters inside the typeface so we can give more presence to the Arabic. Now there are some people, I know that some people, including Sahar Afshar, an Iranian designer, who's thinking of this kind of variability when it comes to extensions in Arabic. But this is just one idea. There's a lot of other, unexplored stuff.
So cool.
Yeah, there's a lot of also different different expressions in terms of different writing styles that we have not touched, even in terms of like, okay, what would this look like in type format? Or I would also want, now I focus a lot on knowing the script, knowing all the characteristics of the script so that you can manipulate them later on. But I would love to reach a level where we have so much knowledge already that we don't have to refer back to the script all the time, but we can build stuff from the components that we would have built by that time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for joining us. This was really, really helpful. For those of you on the call, if you want to reach out to Kristyan, this is the social platforms. Please give us feedback on today's event. The website is afikra.com/wasthisgood. It's a single question survey that would be really, really helpful. I'm putting this in the chat. Was this good? And if you are inspired by our work and you want us to keep going and growing and hosting these events and really trying to do what we're trying to do, which is really decolonize the education around the history, the region's history and culture, and get this, build this democratically built communal library that features all of our interests, and is really built by us and for us, us being the people who have an interest in the region. Please consider being one of our members. They're small monthly contributions, but they go a long way and keep our team working on this stuff. And if you want to attend any of our events or connect with us further, go to our website and reach out if you have any questions. Kristyan, thank you so much.
Thanks again, Mikey, and thanks everyone for attending, the ones I know and the ones I don't know. Thank you very much for being here, and yeah, stay tuned.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.